Welcome, Ruan Baartman, and thank you for joining me today on RaritybyU, Born to Tell My Story. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time, to speak with us. And it's such an honor to have you with me today, because your story is real, raw, and rare. So,
Yeah.
Ruan, welcome. I'm super excited to have you with me.
Well, thank you for having me, and the pleasure is all mine. I'm very excited to speak to you.
Yes, now me too. I'm really, really excited. And I just thought myself, you didn't breathe. He's a normal person like you. Even if your bio is like, scaring me off, but we're gonna do this.
No, we'll be fine. We'll be good.
So, Ruan, let's get right into it. Tell me about yourself, where you grew up, and how did you grow up? Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up in Bloemfontein, in a township called Edendal, which some of your viewers will know. And for the most part, I grew up very typically of somebody who comes from Edendal. My mother was a teacher at one of the local schools. My dad works at the local hospital, and I went to one of the local primary schools. Until about the age of 14, everything was very typical, very normal. And then I had this amazing opportunity to go to the UK to go and study at a music school.
Yes.
And that's sort of that's where I spent the sort of next 12 years of my life, sort of studying / working and so on. And a couple of years ago, I decided to come back to South Africa, but a very sort of, before then, a sort of very typical upbringing here in South Africa, sort of nuclear family, two parents, three sisters, that kind of thing.
Okay, wow. So you went to London.
Well, it's actually, initially I went to a little town called, or like a village, called Cobham. It's like the south, just a bit south of London. So that's where this music school was situated. So it's an international music school, very small, very exclusive. And that's where I sort of finished my schooling bit. And after that, when I left school, I then moved up into London to go and study further.
Okay, you were 14 when you went, that's quite young. Did you go by yourself? Were you a group of people?
No, I went by myself. I mean, I had a mentor, actually, the person who, so actually how it all came about. So I did this music festival in Stellenbosch, and I was a student there at the festival. And one of the things that you have to do is an audition for one of the orchestras. And the person who is listening to me, Leon Bosch, is also actually a South African from Cape Town, but who's lived in the UK for 30, 40 years or whatever. And he said, look, I think you've got some talent, and I think you should come over, you should audition at a couple of the schools and see how far you get. And so I was offered scholarships at both of the schools I auditioned, decided to go to the one. So he was there, he was my legal guardian, sort of looking after me. But essentially I was on my own. But the good thing about being at this specific school is that it was in a way everybody was in the same boat, because everybody was an international student. Everybody was there to sort of further their music dreams and career, and so we all understood what it was about, and you really become a family. So I had that support system there. But essentially I was on my own.
Okay, wow. Okay, so that's amazing. I mean, you also, in a sense, have to grow up very fast as well. Being responsible at that age and whatnot. But can you take me back a little bit on your musical journey? You hear musical. It's such a broad, platform. What are you doing when you?
Yeah, so I am. Well,
yes. So I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah, so I'm a classically trained musician. So that's what I do mainly. I mean, I venture into more mainstream stuff every now and then, but mainly I'm a classical musician. So at the moment, I am what you would call a sort of freelance musician. So I play guest principal with the Free State Symphony Orchestra. I do a lot of chamber music, a lot of solo stuff, sort of recitals. But yeah, a classical musician. When people hear musician, it could be jazz or pop or whatever. But essentially, I'm a classical musician. Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting. Okay, we have similar platforms about sharing stories, creating awareness of how important it is to speak up and speak out, sharing our stories. Can you give me a little background on why you started your platform, Tsena?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I feel very passionately about is mental health, right? Anyway, so I remember, how alone and isolated I felt when I was going through some difficult times in my life, simply because, nobody around me was really speaking openly and honestly about what they were going through. And of course, naively, in that moment, it's tempting to think that you're on your own, and that consequently something is wrong with you.
Yeah.
Of course, in hindsight, that is not the case. And I remember, how pivotal it was for me when I did then hear people speak about their experiences. It is not only that I realized that I was not alone and that there wasn't anything wrong with me, but crucially that there are people, loads of people who have gone through the process and come out the other end living more meaningful and positive lives, and that was really pivotal and powerful for me. And I realized then the responsibility that I had, to share my story, if you like, and to tell the story of other people as well, and what an impact that has on anybody who comes across it, or what impact it can have.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's why I started my platform. I mean, it also has an element of also celebrating people's achievements in a way, So there's sort of different bits to it, and just to, I mean, it's also just to create a culture of this openness, trust, positivity, vulnerability, all of this stuff, create a space where people feel safe.
It's
so essentially that's why I started. And so Tsena, is a Tswana word, which literally, the literal translation means come in, so that sort of signals the ethos of the platform. It's an invitation to come in, and to tell your story.
Yes.
So
It's amazing. I love it because I mean, not everybody, we have a tendency to think that we are alone. So it's so very true that you mentioned that we think we are and we're not. So it's important for us to share our stories in different ways, and who better to speak it than ourselves, So the next question obviously would be the most important question. What is your story? You
You know, it's one of these questions that can mean anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I, as I alluded to earlier, I mean, I'm, you know, uh, uh, sort of normal guy from the township, you know, who got an amazing opportunity and, you know, which changed my life.
Yeah.
And I've lived a rich life, you know, as a result of that. I've had amazing experiences. I've met incredible people. I've been part of amazing opportunities. You know, but with that also, of course, you know, comes some challenges.
Yeah.
You know, as I alluded to, also, you know, feeling alone. You know, going out into the world, you know, and suddenly it hits you that, my goodness, you know, here I am, 6,000 miles away from my family, you know, and there's a lot that goes with that, you know, and you know, at a stage, you know, of adolescence, you know, which is a difficult stage anyway for anybody. Yeah. So it was both a very, very rich time in my life, but also a very challenging one. You know, and I sort of got, you know, you sort of go through things. Every now and then you find yourself in situations, you know, where you have to ask some difficult questions, and you have to reconsider where you're at, that kind of thing. Yeah, so my story is one of you know,
Yeah.
this side to that side of the extremes, the spectrum, if you like.
Yes. I totally get it. So what was the one thing that you had to heal from? We can get, you know, one specific thing that stands out, you know.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, I mean, this word that I think it's thrown around a lot these days, trauma. You know, you have trauma with a small t, you have trauma
Yes.
with a big T, blah blah blah. But you know, the thing, and this is why also another reason why I think it's so important to talk about, you know, one's story and so on, is to also to give people the permission, you know, to share their story, if you see what I mean, and to be open about what they're going through, because, you know, especially as a young male, you know, we sort of let things pile up, you know. You never really deal with things head on or honestly, and you sort of just, you know, put your head in the sand and carry on. But of course, you know, these things, you know, pile up, and then they express themselves in slightly unpleasant ways, you know. So it turns into anxiety or depression or stuff like this, you know, and then it affects, you know, everything in your life, work, relationships, and so on, you know. So I struggled for some time with anxiety and depression, you know, simply because I wasn't dealing with stuff healthily, you know. And so the first thing that I had to do was acknowledge, you know, that this stuff was going on. And then I had to do something about it, you know. So a big thing for me, and you know, the other thing is, you can't deal with this stuff yourself. As one of my mentors said, you know, if you were capable of solving these problems yourself, you wouldn't be in it in the first place. So go and get some help, you know. Yeah, and also, you know, an important point is to get professional help, you know. It's all good and well to speak to friends and family, you know, but they will always be subjective. They will always be compromised because they love you, you know. You know, the sort of the objective kind of thing that you get from professionals. Also, the know-how, you know, people who can tell you exactly where you're at, and what you might want or need to do. So that's what I did, and also, you know, really changed up my lifestyle. You know, part of the reason actually why I returned home from London is because I knew that, you know, it wasn't a great place for me. You know, and I knew that I would just become more and more unhappy if I stayed on. And so for that reason, I didn't see myself there longer term. So, and, this meant, the reason why we're so unhappy, generally speaking, is because we're living a life so disconnected from who we actually are as human beings, so we're living a sort of sedentary life, we're not doing enough exercise, we're not active enough, we're not doing stuff anymore, we're sort of sitting down and lying down and in front of a screen, even our kids, grow up like this now. So we're not exercising, we're not eating right, we're not building meaningful relationships, we're not doing meaningful work, we're going after the money, the status, the titles, but not actually doing meaningful work.
Yes.
Not contributing meaningfully, and this causes a real disconnect with who we are fundamentally as human beings, So for me personally, that I had to look at how I engage with my life, all of these aspects, whether it's work, whether it's friendships, whether it's family, whether it's intimate relationships, whether it's my health, my fitness, how I approach these things and how disciplined I am with these things. And that was really pivotal for me.
Wow. So, trauma can lead us, to feeling less and less than, and not feeling worthy or enough. And there's a feeling that we all in our, some point in our lives experience. How did you deal with it? I think you already mentioned, you came back and connected with the things that you needed to, like exercises, getting physical health, mental health was very important to you. So that's how you dealt with it.
I think one of the biggest thing I think with that is one of the biggest things anyway, is being completely honest with yourself, about where you're at, because I think we always have this discrepancy between who or how or what we want to be versus who we actually are, if you see what I mean. And we spend so much time cultivating perception rather than actually being, if you see what I mean. And so there's this beautiful thing called Sonda. I don't know if you've come across the word and what it means, but there's also Seth Godin, who has this blog, puts it beautifully. But it basically says that everybody has a life just as rich and conflicted as yours, that everybody has insecurities, that everybody has felt affronted, that everybody wants to do well, that everybody's impulse is to contribute. And if you allow this feeling to persist, then it will change not only the way that you see yourself, but how you see everybody else. So your perception about your place in the world completely changes, and so you then realize, first of all, that there's a real community around you, and that you're not alone. But also, your place in that community, your perception of it, changes dramatically. And then, so how you see yourself and your purpose, your contribution, if you see what I mean.
Yes, totally.
But it all starts again, as we hear all the time, it starts with yourself.
It does, and it's the most difficult one.
You can spend. This is the thing, and sort of taking responsibility for yourself. In the true sense. So taking responsibility for your happiness, taking responsibility for your dreams and aspirations. And because it's always easier to look elsewhere, to look outside, but that much harder, but ultimately much more rewarding to look inward and to constantly ask yourself, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that I'm not doing? What is it that I could be doing? Instead of this and this and that, and that changes everything. And so then you start to engage more meaningfully with interactions and opportunities and relationships. You know, you're more present, you're more aware, and that means that your life becomes more meaningful and rich. You know, and it's, you know, that's the thing. Just like the vicious cycle of you know, toxic stuff, there's also a positive cycle. So, and you know, successes, you know, build successes. You know, that's how it goes. So it's doing these little things consistently every day. You know, that gives you this sort of, you know, equilibrium that you can. That's like a bouncing board, you know, of positivity, if you like.
Self-introspection is so important, because we need to look. Many times we're not honest with ourselves, and it's really where you go downhill, because it needs to start at home with yourself. Introspection, self-introspection, honesty. And really, like you already said, that's great advice. I'm really going to take that. Thank you so much. So men really don't talk about, you know, or get into that vulnerable space. Am I right? Okay.
Yeah,
so
you're generally speaking, you're right. Yeah.
But how important is it for men to connect? You already mentioned it as well. I mean, mind, body, and soul, and to heal from childhood trauma, or just trauma as a man. I mean,
it's you know, I always remember, you know, this one day that I was sitting on a train in London, and you know, they give out these free newspapers that everybody reads, you know, on the train. Anyway, I came across this statistic that has stuck to me till this day, and this was now 5-6 years ago, something like that. So the numbers are even more crazy. But at the time, it was something like 54 men on average, you know, kill themselves in the UK every week. You know, not every month, or you know, every week. And that's really quite astonishing, you know. And you know, the even more sort of surprising fact about that, you know, is that when you go into the numbers, a lot of these guys are sort of city guys, your lawyers, your bankers, and whatever. So you think, oh my God, these guys have got it all. You know, they're earning a ton of money.
Yeah.
They've got the big job and so on. So what's wrong? But of course, you know, a big part of the problem is that these guys are not talking about what they're going through. You know, so it's like, you know, just the hole just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. You know, and so again, you know, more specifically, as that's also why I feel a responsibility as a young man to speak openly and to be vulnerable. You know, and I know that it takes a lot of courage. I mean, I know it took me years to get to the point where I actually felt confident enough to say, well, I couldn't give a, you know, what anybody says or whatever. You know, this is me, you know, and I know that there are so many other men, you know, who just need that little push, you know, and who, so even if, you know, just for my catharsis, you know, but hopefully also for, you know, to give another man, even if it's just one other man, you know, that permission to say, well, actually, this is what I'm going through, and to, you know, to have them realize that it's okay. It's more than okay to say that I'm not coping. You know, this is what I'm going through. I'm battling with this. You know, I need help. I need support. It's okay to say that. That's not weak. That's not weakness. In fact, it's more courageous, you know, than pretending to be fine. You know, and also realizing, you know, how dangerous it can be, you know, to not be honest and not to be open, you know, because as I mentioned, you know, earlier about repressing stuff, you know, it then expresses itself in really unpleasant ways. And this is why we have, you know, this buzzword that's going around at the moment, toxic masculinity, you know, term. That's why we have this, because men don't ever learn healthy ways of expressing themselves. You know, so it's, you know, it comes out in this really toxic, aggressive, and sort of, you know, so yeah, I mean, it is so important, you know, and I mean, the numbers don't lie, you know. If men were really as strong as they claim to be, you know, then we wouldn't have the shocking numbers
Yes.
that we're seeing, you know. So if they're listening out there, you know, really it's okay, you know, to be vulnerable and to be open.
Yeah, no, vulnerability is strength. It's really, and it really takes courage, like you said, and discipline and perseverance, you know, to make that mental shift and to reach out, to seek help, and just to speak out, you know. It's not easy, and it won't be easy, but the moment you know, make that shift and decide what you need to do for yourself. What is the Alfie? We have a tendency to think about all these titles and that you have to live up to these things, but it really is to step out for yourself and finding the healthiest version of yourself through happiness. I mean, the inner peace is what gets you through as well, and it's very difficult to get to that point. How did you manage to make that mental, you know, internal mental shift and to open up and to be vulnerable, firstly to yourself?
Well, it was kind of a choice, but also not. I mean, I think, you know, when you sort of, what they would call, you know, rock bottom, when you hit rock bottom, you know, it's either that if you go past that, then it's, you know, it's done.
Yeah.
So you have two choices. You let it happen, or you do something about it, you know. And I quite like living, you know. So you know, and I quite like living a happy life, you know. So I sort of realized, oh, I you know, I need to deal with this. And of course, you know, one of the things I knew, you know, that needed to happen was that I needed to be a bit more open. I needed to be a bit more vulnerable. I needed to surrender myself in some ways. And as I said earlier, I mean, it took me years really to learn the courage and to build the confidence to do that. But you know, luckily, I've always had an amazing support system. You know, people who are sort of in touch, you know, and you know, with this thing, you know, and who are aware of what people go through, and you know, and that was also a really sort of a crucial thing, you know, and unfortunately not something that a lot of people have, you know, a support system, you know, because again, you know, we can't do this stuff all on our own.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, as the saying goes, you know, that no life transformation has ever happened without the person in question getting tired of their own bullshit. So that's kind of, you know, what happened with me. You know, I was tired of being miserable. I was tired of being frustrated. I was tired of falling that bit shy of my potential, blah, 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 you know, not being able to sustain healthy relationships. I just got tired of that. And the thing, you know, I think the important thing to note, also detail to note, is that also it's not this kind of journey, you know. You have this thing where you're like, and then it, you know, and then it goes up, you know, that kind of thing. You know, it's and it's, and you know, unfortunately, you know, we're sold, you know, these guys on social media unfortunately sell us this idea that growth and healing is about, you know, sitting and lying in a bubble bath with some candles and drinking wine and putting on Nora Jones. It's not that. You know, it's not that. The bulk of it is doing stuff you don't want to do. It's going through stuff, experiencing and dealing with and acknowledging stuff that is really painful, right? It is. It's not the Instagram videos, you know, that people post. You know, it's those days when yeah, so I'm still on my journey, and I will forever be on my journey. I will forever be healing and learning, and unlearning, yeah. So
It's beautiful.
yeah, for me, that it's sort of, it was both a choice and not a choice,
Yes.
to acknowledge all of this stuff.
Yeah, no, and there's also a lot of shame that comes with, you owning it, you speaking it, and like previous conversation that we had, that you feel embarrassed because of what is made to be believed in our communities, that when you go through depression or some mental illness or whatever got you to that point, you're crazy. You are, labeled as crazy. Man, kom ons slaan die demons uit jou uit. Dis wat bid vir hierdie ene.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
I mean, especially as you allude to. I mean, especially in communities of color.
yeah.
There is this thing. I mean, I'm happy. I'm excited to see that the conversation is more and more open.
Yeah.
But we do grow up in a sort of culture and community that rejects this or denies the existence of mental illness as a real illness, that
Yes.
it's this thing, that it's this abstract thing, and it's shameful and it's embarrassing, and it's hush hush, don't talk about it kind of thing. But I'm past that stage, and I couldn't care less about that.
Yeah, it's just like the positivity that comes afterwards. So it's like you said, it's downhill, and it's very hard to go through that. Like the beginning, it's like I don't know if I can use this, like the birth pains. It's like birth pains. And then you have to get through it. You can't skip it.
Bypass it. Yeah.
Bypass it. And then you get to the stage where you're just like, I'm a work in progress. I call myself a work in progress, because that's what we are. It's an everyday thing. You, like you said, you're unlearning, you're learning, and just finding that, but you're more happier than you were. And we get our off days, but that's pretty normal. But it's not that tip, the stage where you were before, So that's incredible. That really is that sense of freedom, right?
Yeah. It's really it's liberating, because you're living your true self, and that's the thing that people don't understand. You can do everything that you want, but unless you get closer and closer to that core truth, your body is always going to reject whatever is going on. Your spirit, your energy is always going to reject stuff. But the closer you live to your truth, the more in tune you become, the more aligned you become, and the more stuff you attract that is in line with that, and that all of that equals happier, more fulfilled, more meaningful.
I love it. So we are all about, we've heard a lot of like, okay, let's break generational cycles, curses. But what would be your best, or your best generational blessing that you take from your childhood? But more focused on the generational blessings. Is there any particular moment or memory that stood out for you?
Well, maybe not one, but I mean, I think that the one thing that communities of color do very well is a sense of family and community.
Yes.
And I think that's something that I understood from very early on. The fact that you can't live on an island, that you're part of something, and this connection, to the world, that's always something that I've always, worn,
Yeah.
on me. And that's a really positive thing, and because it really it changes the way that you engage with people. It's not transactional, it's not superficial, because we're taught, to build relationships with people, right? And we understand the word community, or Ubuntu, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, no, community is very important. And it's through what you're saying about that. We've come sort of like, we are connected, how you treat people. And we're also learning now quite a lot about kindness, bringing that humanity back into how we actually grew up. Humanity back in the day, it was just like all about that. And just learning to do that, relive it again. So we hear all about being kind and so on, which is quite
absolutely. I mean, another concept that I came across a couple of years ago is this idea of, an infinite versus finite mindset. And unfortunately, most people live with a finite mindset, right? And this means that they think that life is about winning and losing, that everything is a competition. But of course, it's not like that. We live in an infinite world, so there's room for everybody. Everybody has their space, and they're allowed to have their space. And somebody moving forward is not my failure or downfall. In fact, we are all much better off if we encourage each other, if we support each other, and if we make things happen for each other. We're all much better off as a result of that. And so then it sort of compulses you to be kind and to be generous. So again, it's all about perception and outlook in that sense.
Yes, it definitely is. So you're quite a very busy man, in terms of your career and stuff. How did you manage during the pandemic? I mean, this was huge. This was a huge shock to everyone. So
I think like everyone, it's been everything from the worst of the worst to some of the most some moments of real opportunity and growth and so on. But I mean, specifically, as professionally for me as an artist, it's been devastating, right? Because we've essentially, as performing artists, we've essentially been out of work, for the past year and a half, with the exception of a couple of things, that have happened, or gaps that we've had to do stuff. We've basically not been able to go out and to perform. And I mean, we've had to rely on sort of online teaching, which, has proven to be, much more troublesome than one would think. So it's been a really, really challenging time. It's been frustrating. It's been stressful. But as I say, it's also been a time of real, it's been a real opportunity to, it's been a time of clarity, and real growth, because you have the time and space, to really deal with stuff.
Yes.
Professionally, it's been tough, but in terms of growth, it's generally speaking been quite positive and fruitful, if you like.
Yes. A time to reflect and just say, okay, let's start with something fresh, new direction. Obviously, but just having like an overview of all that you did over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, like for instance, I mean, my platform Tsena, I mean, I've had the idea for years to start something, but suddenly I had the time and the mental space, to actually do it. And that opened up a whole new world to me. Suddenly I considered, options that I never thought of. So different career opportunities, I've met so many different people, recently through doing different things.
Yes.
Not just being bound by what I've been doing for the past few years. So yeah, in that sense, it's been fruitful.
Yeah, no, it had its pros and cons. Okay, so we grew up, having the gift. This is also what happened during lockdown, the human touch. We missed that quite a lot. Really, it was something like, okay, and then you learn to appreciate more the people in your life, and just you come to this space where you do not take life for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's as you say. I mean, human contact. Is something. For all of our lives, we take this thing for granted, and suddenly it gets taken away. And then we realize the value of it. And this is again coming back to this thing of community, right? We are social beings. A big part of our being is relying on having that contact and interaction with people. And also, it makes you think about how you engage with people. Not just to really be present. When you're interacting with people, meaningful interactions. How you choose to spend your time, invest your energy and time. When it comes to people. And also, the perhaps morbid reality of just death or mortality. All of us in this time have lost loved ones.
Yeah.
Right? And it sort of sobers you. You're sort of reminded of the fragility and fleeting nature of life. And how precious it is, and how incredibly lucky and fortunate we are to have it.
Yeah.
And it really changes. I mean, it's like there's this interview of Neil deGrasse Tyson, this scientist, American scientist, and he's being interviewed by RareKing, and RareKing asks him, are you afraid of dying? And he says, it's not only that I'm not afraid of dying, but knowing that I'm going to die gives me the urgency to live, now, to express love now, to contribute meaningfully now.
Wow.
And so I think, that's one of the things that also that's come out of this thing, that people have really been reminded of that urgency, to live, to love, and to contribute. And that's really positive.
Yeah, because we've always used the term life is short, and it wasn't as touching as it was during this couple of this 2 years. So it's really like, okay, live now, love now. I love it. So like we said now, we grew up, the human touch as well, the connections, playing. We also had this discussion previously, and but how would you say social media impacts our youth of today in their mental health? Because it's, social media creates a different view of what life really is, and it definitely has an impact on our youth of today. What's your opinion?
I mean, it's both, like, I think it's both technology and then social media. I think so. Start like with kids.
Yeah.
You mentioned the playing thing, right? We were outside all of the time. We never wanted to be inside. We didn't even need toys. We made them. And what that did was, you learned, like the making thing. You were touching stuff. You were using your hands. You were engaged in a different way. You were also with friends all the time. You built relationships. You went through all of that stuff that comes with having friends, or, and then as you move along, we, I mean, I remember the first time that I tried to court a girl, the feeling that I had.
Yes.
But it was important, to go through that feeling. It was important to be rejected for the first time. You know, it was important to go through all of this stuff, because I learned skills out of it. I learned coping skills, out of it. Healthy coping skills, by the way, not defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this stuff is not happening anymore. So young people are not learning these skills, right? It's very different, being on your phone swiping left or right, or going through somebody's profile on Instagram, DMing them. It's very different from actually going up to somebody and asking them their name and actually, learning about them,
Yes.
So unfortunately, they're not learning these skills, and that's why they seem to crumble, a lot, at the face of challenges and adversity,
Yes.
and it's not their fault, that's the frustrating thing about it, it's their part of the culture.
Yes.
But then also, social media is, there's more of an emphasis on being perceived as happy, being perceived as successful, or whatever,
Yes.
rather than actually being, So, we see this all the time. People, literally go out and do stuff just so that they can put it on social media.
Yeah.
Right? People do stuff just so that they can take a video to post on social media.
Yes.
Right? So it doesn't have the same value. Going out for a run doesn't have the same value if you're only doing it, long enough so that you can, put it on Instagram, right? Going out to a restaurant with friends doesn't mean the same thing if all you're going to be doing is taking pictures of the food, right? Instead of engaging, enjoying the food and engaging with your friends and so on. So it's sort of like a virtual world, which has taken over the reality of things. And again, to come back to this thing, it creates this disconnect.
Yeah.
Because we all know it's a lie. We all know that this is not who we are as people.
Yes.
We know, but we perpetuate it, and this is why we become more and more unhappy. And this is why people have these burnouts, these overloads, where they feel like they have to delete their apps, Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And, that's not necessarily the answer, longer term anyway. It's about how you engage with social media.
Yes.
And so for me, it's, at some point I realized that the shift went from it being a sort of like a sort of platform about myself, or to promote myself, or being self-absorbed, to really taking responsibility and really thinking about what I put out.
Yeah.
Also thinking about what I take in, so what do I subscribe to? Who do I follow? What do I follow? And not to be sucked in, to this, this thing.
It's very sad, but it's also, we also can make use of social media and use it for our businesses, and but getting back to that point again, being true to yourself and not living up to certain expectations. And Tsena, I also feel sorry for our youth at times, because it was absolutely great to play out there, I remember this time in my life when it was grocery shopping, so we would go to wherever, and whatever our parents put out there in the trash, we brought it back, because that's our group. But it was so much fun, just to play around and have that feeling of like communication face to face, the feel, the touch, the connections, and building relationships, So, there's a lot of great organizations to support, and we sharing the similar thing of sharing your story and how it can help with the healing process. So again, how does this help, sharing your story with your healing process of where you've been? During your healing process, how did it help you?
What, sharing my story?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's cathartic, right? You know, it's like, you know, writing something down. You know, this is why people, you know, write songs. This is why they write poetry, and stories. You know, I mean, as I mentioned to you just before, you know, I was listening to Adele, and one of the songs. I mean, it's, you know, that's literally her life, right? And especially as an artist, as a musician, I know how cathartic that is for her. To get it out, you know. There's so much healing. There's so much release, you know, because it's like, you know, one can, you know, feel this emotional sort of pressure. You know, and then suddenly there's just this release, and it's like, you know, you can breathe. Yeah, and so it's catharsis, you know, sharing my story, you know, apart from the responsibility that I feel towards other people. For me personally, it's about working through the stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's
because I mean, there are sort of dots that connect. It's like literally when you hear yourself saying certain things, it's like, oh, you know, it's weird to say, but it's like, oh, that makes sense, you know.
Yes.
You know, it's okay, you know. Then, so in that way, it's really important to share your story. You know, catharsis.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's so true. In different, we only think there's one way of doing it, but like you said, it's poetry. It's, you know, you're writing songs and whatnot. It's you can find what works for you. But obviously, also like you mentioned, the professional help during your journey is also so important. It's very important. But what keeps you going on difficult days?
Well, as I mentioned before, an amazing support system. That's a big part of who I am. And you know, I think as we all, you know, as we go along, we get to know what makes us tick, what doesn't, you know. So for me, spending time with myself, you know, is a big thing.
Yes.
I love reading, you know. I love even just spending idle time with myself. I love going out for runs because it's, apart from the physical thing, it's just a cleansing thing. Yeah, and just, I mean, a big thing for me is interaction. Like I love being around people. Yeah, and that connection keeps me going, you know. Again, it's knowing that you're not alone, you know. Even when you are alone, kind of thing, you know, physically.
Yeah, and people normally also, we are normally scared to be by ourselves, our own thoughts, because it's your own thoughts can be so scary, and it's a battle, a mental battle, you know, a battle in your mind, and it's very difficult. But it's also so important to get to that point and not have this fear of being alone. But what was, you know, the life lesson? What is your life lesson through your whole journey? And what advice can you share with us, young men going through the same situation, or that went through what you went through?
Well, I would say, you know, trust the process, you know, enjoy the journey. Be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself. You know, love yourself as you love other people. You know, and do everything with sincerity, with meaning. Be as present as you can. You know, and don't be too attached, you know, to who you necessarily want to be, you know, but focus more on where you're at the moment, and that will inform, you know, where you're going, if you see what I mean. It's like always, you know, people ask, always, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah.
I mean, the honest answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows, where they're going to be, and in fact, we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves in that sense, so my thing is, actually in 5 years, I hope that I can look back and say that I've lived as meaningfully and as present as I possibly could.
Yeah.
That I've made the most of the opportunities that I've gotten, that I've treated people with the most kindness and generosity. But as to where exactly I see myself, I don't know.
Yeah.
So enjoy the journey, trust the process. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, and you will find yourself where you're supposed to be in time to come.
So I'm taking that. Love that advice. Okay, what legacy do you want to leave behind? I know we're running out of time and I'm stealing your time, but ek wil net aanhou praat met jou.
No, I'm enjoying this. Well, one of my absolute favorite quotes is by Horace Mann, and it says, be ashamed to die if you have not contributed to humanity.
Yes.
And so, whether it be in my capacity as a musician or as just a human being or whatever, I would hope that there would be at least one person, that is liberated by having met me or come across me, that feels safer, that feels more courageous and more confident in being themselves. I would hope that there are young people that I would have helped in their journey. And I would like people to remember me as somebody who, I don't know, I suppose chose love in the most generous, sense. Because that's how I want to see myself. If you see what I mean. Yeah.
Oh, this was really, really, really nice. A powerful conversation. Just having to speak to you. Is there anything else you would like to share before we say our goodbyes?
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I've really, really, really enjoyed this, and I'm really, really excited to see where this goes. I'm really happy that you've established this platform. It's so important. And I'm very, very excited for you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share with you.
Oh, thank you, because that's my words. That's my words. I was gonna say thank you for this. Thank you, Ruan.
Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity.
So
I really appreciate it. Like, really, thank you so much. And I hope to speak to you, more in the future. And it's I really thank you for getting into that vulnerable space. Also, what you're doing is amazing, and people need to hear this more often. Having guys to speak up as well. A lot of people will be touched by this. I know that for a fact. So just by sharing your story with me and the world, I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best, and I know we will speak soon again.
Yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.